Caroline Hyde from Bloomberg Television. What a joy it is to be discussing the world of blockchain next with none other than Joe Lubin. Joe, come take a seat, take a mic. You will know him as the co-founder of the Ethereum project, and he is also founder of ConsenSys. Now, we're a tech audience. I want you to get and embrace your technology in front of you. Please open your VivaTech app. We're going to do some live polling. We want to get a sense in the audience of how well versed you are in the realms of blockchain. So open up your app and give me a vote, because I first of all want to ask you, how well do you understand blockchain? We're going to ask you whether you can bluff it, whether you don't understand it at all, or whether you understand it really quite well. So we're just going to ask for the technologists in here to activate that particular live poll for us. But while we do that, Joe, let's start off with assuming little or no knowledge of blockchain here right now. Explain Ethereum project that you co-founded.
Sure, thank you. So in order to understand blockchain and the Ethereum project, it helps to understand what Bitcoin is or was. So Bitcoin is essentially three separate inventions that all work together beautifully. The first is the Bitcoin, the money, the value token. The second is the blockchain system. So it's a peer-to-peer network system that essentially automates trust. The third is crypto economics. Crypto economics is a mechanism that enables, it sort of marries the token itself to the underlying next generation database infrastructure. Crypto economics incentivizes lots of different actors to share their resources to validate transactions and secure a network like that. So that is the mechanism that essentially automates trust. In around 2012, there were lots of different projects that were interested in bringing this technology to much more than just the money application. And so various different approaches were tried, and an individual named Vitalik Buterin invented Ethereum. He wrote a white paper describing a platform that separated the protocol layer from the application layer and made it comfortable, familiar for software developers to build any sort of application on that new next generation database infrastructure. And so that can be done on the public world blockchain, or it can be done in private permission versions of the same technology.
This was your so-called ethereal moment when you saw this white paper and you were mesmerized by it. Well, there's the answer. We have 54% say they can bluff it, Joe. 25% we're preaching to the converted, they get it, and 21% have no idea what it means. So we're going to cater to all knowledge bases here. So Ether, then, on the Ethereum network, is an application to a certain extent. It's the token. But you at ConsenSys now are helping drive forward all sorts of creativity when it comes to building apps on blockchain, in this blockchain being particularly the Ethereum blockchain.
Sure. So we think of Ether actually as similar in some ways to Bitcoin, but quite distinct as well. Bitcoin is a money, it's a cryptocurrency. The entire Bitcoin network exists in the service of that token. Ether, we positioned as a fuel. It is required to pay for programs, to run programs to store data on the network. So Ether exists in service of the network of this decentralized application platform.
And becomes more valuable to a certain extent, the more valuable the underlying Ether network becomes.
It's all subject to supply and demand, and if there is a tremendous amount of demand for Ether, with the relatively fixed amount of it, there will be increased issuance, but it's going to taper off pretty dramatically. Then it is likely to increase in value. There are thousands of companies around the world who are building in so many different niches. On the consulting side of our company, we've built in private permission systems in the energy space, in banking, insurance, supply chain, education, healthcare. On the product side of our company, we're building applications in advertising technology. We're tokenizing ownership of real estate. We're building software support systems, expert networks, supply chain platforms, advertising technology
so there's
platforms,
sort of no industry
identity
untouched,
systems.
basically.
Yeah, essentially you can think of this technology as a continuation of the internet protocols. So we have internet protocols, we have Web 1.0 protocols, we have Web 2.0 protocols, which is essentially where we are right now.
Yeah.
So that's all the things we can do together, interactive, web pages, mobile, social, e-commerce. But this technology enables us to bring native money to the World Wide Web, to the decentralized World Wide Web. It enables us to bring automatically enforceable agreements. So it enables us to essentially enable bots, machines to also have some sort of agency on the decentralized World Wide Web.
So sort of the so-called smart contract coming into play there.
Yeah, so the smart contract it's not smart and it's not a contract, it's just a program that exists on the blockchain. And it is, it's one of the elements that provides automated transactions. Essentially trust plus automated transactions is the essence of Ethereum.
You talked about how the value of Ether is to a large extent dictated by supply and demand. Now, there's also the issue of the scalability of the Ethereum network, and interestingly, this is a question coming from the audience saying, what do you think the future of the Ethereum scalability looks like? How does it overcome some of its scaling challenges?
Yeah, so both Bitcoin and Ethereum and various, essentially all the other blockchain systems are in a version 1 phase where they are extremely sophisticated, well-utilized proofs of concept. All these systems in their version 1 realization essentially process all the transactions on the network, they store all the data on the network, and that's not scalable. If we're going to get to the point where the world's transactions are on these systems, we need to architect them in a much more sophisticated way. So for Ethereum this year, we're going to see various different technologies. One is state channels, where you can originate a set of transactions and finalize a set of transactions, but then essentially an infinite number of transactions can be done off the blockchain.
Okay.
Or side chains. There are various different versions of side chains. There's a technology called Loom right now. There's a technology called Plasma or Plasma Cash right now. Loom enables side chains that have some sort of ability to speak to the public Ethereum network. Plasma is essentially the killer scalability technology for this next phase. And Plasma enables us to build different kinds of systems, say a blockchain system in its own right, run by whoever wants to run it, built fit for purpose, but then it can be embedded in a smart contract on Ethereum. So what that does is it gives that blockchain system as much scalability as it needs, because you choose your consensus algorithm for scalability if you need it. But then it gives the users of that system the full security of the radically decentralized Ethereum network, so that if you have, let's say, a CryptoKitties application on a Plasma chain.
Just explain CryptoKitties.
Oh, so CryptoKitties is a collectible crypto curio, cute little cats that can breed and are being traded for their different genetic characteristics at sometimes very high values. So it's
how much did one go for in Manhattan the other week?
Oh, so that was a picture of one. It was $140,000. Yeah, it was a little bit silly, but fun.
Quite the collectible.
Exactly. So you can build an application in one of these Plasma networks, and you can have smooth interoperation between Ethereum and that network, such that if something goes wrong on that network, then people could pull their tokens of value out back into Ethereum. Or if they just want to pull them out or put them into that network, that's fairly easy to do. And so even if you have an application that uses a few of these plasma networks, you can pull your tokens back into Ethereum and move them into other networks. So we're starting to see in that phase real scalability, and that's going to happen in a very big way this year, within a few months. The longer range story is about taking a single Ethereum, a single monolithic network, and sharding it, sort of breaking it up logically into initially 100 different versions that are all kept consistent.
And we're getting quite into the weeds there.
Yeah,
but basically,
you told me not to get technical.
Yeah. But basically, by scaling, it will mean you can do what the blockchain is aimed to do. Very quick, immediately, online transactions.
So Bitcoin can handle about 2 transactions per second right now.
Which isn't very much compared to Visa and MasterCard.
Ethereum can handle about 20. Visa, some people quote 70,000 per second at bursts. I think the real number is about 25,000 per second. Facebook can handle a lot of transactions per second. So these network systems need to get much more scalable. And we're going to see essentially an internet of blockchain systems that are linked to one another in fluid ways accomplish that.
Now, as we still look at the scaling issues and you overcome them, this hasn't in any way dampened the demand coming from corporates in particular to look to build their own private blockchains. You've got JP Morgan doing such, you've got many governments, NGOs looking at the applicability of all of this. Interestingly, you mentioned Facebook there. There's a question from the audience saying Google is basically the internet. How much of a threat is Google to blockchain's development as a whole? Would they be someone who would adopt blockchain technology, do you think, in the end? Are they someone that you're already working with?
Yeah, so first, let me just continue on a little bit. It is important to distinguish public blockchain systems from the same technology implemented in a private permission context or a public permission context. In those sorts of contexts where governance is much easier, you can relax constraints, optimize things, and you can get a lot of transactions per second. So,
and that's sort of what the banks are looking at.
Yeah, exactly. So if a bank is using the Ethereum technology, they're not looking at 20 transactions per second. They could be looking at thousands of transactions per second. Is Google the internet? I don't think Facebook would agree with that, or many other applications.
Or Tim Berners-Lee.
All these different large internet players are getting very sophisticated, or at least interested in what blockchain is, what it's going to bring, whether it will be disruptive to their particular business models. I would argue that the internet is profound, has been profound in its transformation of society over these many years, but we've outgrown the foundations of it. One of the ways we've outgrown it is that there was essentially no identity construct created for the internet. As a result, we've sprayed aspects of our identity throughout the internet, get stored on corporate servers, monetized by corporations, and often not adequately secured by corporations. Cambridge Analytica, GDPR, lots of other episodes.
And acronyms.
Have caused people to think now very seriously, and there are very serious penalties for doing improper things with personal information now. And so we have this notion now of the decentralized World Wide Web and self-sovereign identity. So self-sovereign identity doesn't mean you can go around with your own laws. It just means that you should have control of your own personal data. And so we've built a system. There are other systems out there. Ours is called Uport, where you can establish your own blockchain-based identity. You can encrypt aspects of your identity. You can control them from your side of the browser, and you can selectively disclose them in situations that you designate. So this is one of the important elements of the coming decentralized World Wide Web. It's definitely going to turn business models around somewhat, where Facebook and Google and many others are all about acquiring personal information and exploiting it. So I think that if they're agile, They will be able to adapt. They will be able to recognize that if people's personal data is under their control, that they will consider uploading higher value data and potentially sharing that data in open data markets. So Facebook and Google may have to pay us directly for that data if we're willing to share it. But we should be the ones monetizing it. We shouldn't really be the product.
Are you working with Facebook at the moment?
We are not working with Facebook at the moment.
Because they've, interestingly, of course, gone down the path of blockchain, announcing David Marcus.
We have lightweight conversations with lots of different companies in the space, sometimes heavier weight conversations.
Talk to us about, therefore, sovereignty. Data sovereignty is a real practical application of the blockchain, of why it's important to us going forward. A question from the floor is saying, look, give us some more real-world problems that blockchain technology can help fix. What will we be using it for in a day-to-day basis 10 years, 20 years from now?
Yeah, so it's really hard to come upon an exponential technology and predict how it's going to twist and turn 2 years from now, let alone 10 years from now. What we're seeing right now is sort of like the advent of the internet, where and it's moving even faster, but it's also more complicated because we have this natively digital money and natively digital other form crypto assets, basically. And so there are hundreds of projects that are building out core components, identity, bounty systems, decentralized governance tools, accounting systems, fungible tokens, non-fungible tokens, atomic swap mechanisms, name registries.
You're losing us.
I know. So I'm trying to give you a sense of just how much is going on. All these projects are moving towards maturity at different rates. And so all these different building blocks are coming available to entrepreneurs. We're building out the Web 3.0, the decentralized World Wide Web, and that's going to consist of protocol-based open platforms. So instead of services being delivered by companies in a somewhat adversarial relationship with their customer, we're going to have these network business models where lots of different independent actors, companies and people, are in different roles on these network platforms. None of those roles are overly controlling or overly monetizing, yet they're fluidly interoperating to deliver services to customers. And so you can, I mean, there are many little niches that we're building those platforms in, but you can imagine.
Give us a niche.
Sorry?
Give us a niche.
Advertising technology. So we've got a platform that creates a whitelist for publishers, a whitelist for advertisers, and ideally makes a dent in the enormous amount of fraud in the advertising technology space. So one could imagine, with all these different building blocks, a group of young entrepreneurs who are interested in building better systems, maybe satisfied with small margins, could put together a ride-sharing application. So you do all the navigation logic, you figure out all the insurance, and a company like Uber is not probably going to be that interested in shrinking down to chase those margins.
Yeah.
But if this company can get relevant, what they can do is they can use the technology to sell a token representing consumer access, consumption of the resources on the platform. So they could sell the token to drivers, they can sell the token to riders, and suddenly all these people own the system that they're operating and using. And so that will be transformative. So business models where content creators, and we're building an adjacent music industry infrastructure, service providers, resource providers are able to directly access their consumer, essentially writing out large intermediaries that suck up half the value of an ecosystem or more. Those are the kinds of business models that will see disruption.
Now, the issue with blockchain as a whole has been that initially it was tainted with the fact that it was perhaps used by people who didn't want their identities known, and therefore came in the whole Silk Road and issues that it was buying drugs. Now it seems to be in some way confused with the fact that there's hacks that go on of exchanges, for example. People find that suddenly their wallet has been drained of all their cryptocurrencies. But the actual blockchain technology itself is meant to be safer, meant to be immutable, made to stop any sort of hacking. There is a question from the audience saying, look, if blockchain integrity is compromised, if it's hacked, what is plan B? Can it be compromised?
Yeah, so the number of people who have had their identity stolen, who've had their lives ruined, who've had value stolen from them in the legacy internet and financial world dwarfs the number of people who've had the same sort of thing happen on blockchain systems. Partially because blockchain systems are smaller. They are very immature still, yet they have been operating at the protocol level for a number of years. Ethereum is about 3 years old, Bitcoin's about 9. And those systems have been protecting many billions of dollars worth of value in an open context where all the hackers in the world are invited to steal that value. The protocols have been rock solid. At the application layer for Ethereum, there's still a lot of sharp edges. We're still figuring out that technology. And so there are many different groups that are building better approaches, building better technologies, better programming languages to make sure that, that we're able to build safely and prudently at the application layer.
Keep all these questions coming, please, because we want to ensure that we're hitting the base of your knowledge in the right way. Oh, I've got some breaking news here that, of course, was actually broken by Bloomberg earlier today, saying that the US Justice Department has opened a criminal investigation into price manipulation of cryptocurrencies, namely Bitcoin and Ether. How are you finding regulators dealing with this? Is there price manipulation, for example, going on when it comes to cryptocurrencies?
Sure. So our company ConsenSys is a software developer. We build applications. We build lots of the infrastructure for the Ethereum ecosystem. So we don't really focus on cryptocurrency. We don't trade cryptocurrencies. I guess some of our people do, but it's not what we think about all day, every day. It is absolutely the case that this is a new technology, and the exchanges at which these tokens are traded are not regulated in the same way that, let's say, a stock exchange would be regulated. So there probably are people who are taking advantage of every situation that they can take advantage of. That's what sophisticated traders in our world do. So I do think that we need to sort out regulation around cryptocurrencies, and I think it will go fine because they're tremendous and important use cases that should argue that cryptocurrency should remain unfettered, essentially, for trading, and regulation around other tokens, so equity tokens, tokens that represent derivatives. So there's a tremendous amount of discussion with respect to investor tokens that can represent equity, or consumer utility tokens that would be sort of used on one of these networked business model platforms, can represent membership, can represent consumption of a scarce resource, potentially. There are many different models of those things that regulators around the world seem to be comfortable would not be considered securities. So if you're doing one of these tokens and you are attempting to sell it in enormous quantities to essentially speculators, then the regulators are going to have a problem with that. But if you sell one of these tokens to enable access to your network service, and people who buy it demonstrate that they will use it, we've created a system to enable technical accreditation of these token buyers, so that they pretty much have to answer questions indicating that they know what they're doing and that they're going to use the token. So I think with respect to securities, we're going to see things settled this year, definitely in 2018.
Are you having plenty of conversations, I mean, around the world? Are you having to speak with regulators particularly about, well, to ensure that Ether isn't deemed a security?
Yeah, so we've been having discussions with regulators around the world for 3 years, actually. Lots of discussions about securities law, some discussions about cryptocurrencies, and there's been a couple of voices recently that have made statements that they believe that the Ether token itself is a security. And so issues around that are, were token buyers led to believe that they would make profits by the effort of others? And we have done very deep legal work. We did that before we sold any Ether token, so we're fully confident that it was never a security. It started out in a very decentralized platform context and has since grown enormously decentralized. So it does look like regulators are looking into both the origins of some of these tokens, but also what they currently are now. And if they represent essentially a utility that is in a massively decentralized context, then I think the verdict is that those are not securities.
Now, Joe, I don't know if we've managed to carry everyone along the path with us as we made our discussion, but if you were going to leave a parting word with those in the audience, you were a man who used to work at Goldman Sachs. You had your ethereal moment, as you mentioned, realizing that really this was the future. Paint your utopia of what blockchain and what Ethereum means to you, to whet the appetite to get people reading that little bit more.
Yeah, so the technology represents a sea change in how our world is organized by automating trust, by enabling transactions between actors who don't know one another, maybe who compete with one another. We transform the world from building siloed walled garden infrastructure to building shared collaborative infrastructure as the foundational element. If you add to that the fact that we are able to create tokens, digitally scarce representations of many things of value, things for money, for equities, for identity, reputation, legally enforceable agreements, and have those trade very fluidly, and have clearing and settlement happen in the instant of the transaction rather than over hours, days, weeks. We have an engine for tremendous exponential growth.
You have a Twitter handle. Give it to people so they can contact you.
Ethereum Joseph.
Get in touch if you have more questions. Please give it up to Joe Lubin, of course, founder of ConsenSys and co-founder of the Ethereum project. Thank you.
Thank you.